I think that what differentiates this market from anything I've ever seen, Ivan, and I've been doing this now for almost 36 years, is the amount of physical demand that is being accumulated. Now, we've talked at length about the central banks that have been buying gold. We're seeing action with the central banks buying silver. Now, of course, it started with Russia saying they were going to add it to their stockpile. First time I've ever seen a government do that. And then it mitigated or excuse me, moved towards China. Talking to guys like Sean Kuhn from Dolly Varden, he says, look, Andy, the Chinese, who are the second largest producer in the world, they told David Morgan they're the first, by the way, but needless to say, they're massive producers. Sean says they're flying all around Latin America, in particular places like Peru, even all the way up to Mexico, and pulling metal out of the ground before it's even called silver. They're buying doré, they're buying concentrate. They're paying double what the West will do to disintermediate the whole market, sending it back to China for refining. So you have the first or second largest producer in the world finds it significant enough to fly around the world and buy doré and concentrate right out of the ground from the miners, directly from the miners, and then sending it back to do so under the cover of anonymity, so to speak. No one really knows how much they're buying or what they're getting, but Sean can validate that is indeed what is happening. You look at the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia, disappointing as it may be that they bought huge amounts of SLV, maybe one of the worst products I've ever seen ever in my career, because just as a side note, the short position right now in SLV is 53.97 million shares, which
Wow.
is it's grotesque, it's ridiculous. And remember what the prospectus said, BlackRock said, there could come a time when there's not enough silver to cover those short positions, buyer beware. But the point is, we're seeing lots of silver that is being accumulated by the central banks. What is really different to me, as far as I'm concerned, is the amount of silver that is coming into the COMEX. And, last week I jotted down some numbers. In month to date in September, the number of contracts, and this was last week, I'm sure it's much more now, that stood for delivery was 10,599 contracts. Let's do the math real quick. 10,599 contracts times each contract weight being 5,000 ounces is 52,995,000 ounces. We'll multiply that, let's just call it by 42. That's $2,225,790,000 worth of silver has come into COMEX in the first week or so of the month. And this is what we've seen over and over and over again. The point I want to get across here is that when you have countries, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, let's not forget about India, who's bought somewhere between 600 and 800 million ounces over the last 5 years. That's more than is on the COMEX and the LBMA combined. And now you see it happening in the United States. At this level, the people don't just have the most money that are standing for delivery. Now, when we say stand for delivery, mind you, this is going into COMEX. A lot of it leaves. A lot of it doesn't leave. So regardless if it's leaving COMEX or being put into an eligible account, not registered, meaning it's not available for sale, it's going into strong hands, to this degree, these people are not only the most well-funded traders on the planet, i.e. the central banks, the commercial banks, the very sophisticated traders that can stand for delivery on COMEX to the tune of billions of dollars every month since November, since the election, but they're also the most well-informed. And I think that's the most important thing to understand, is that the people at this level who swim in circles of 9-figure monthly acquisitions are not doing things just for kicks. They're doing it because they understand where we are going. They know the playbook. They are at the highest level of information. And that's what I take away from really where we're at this moment, is that price is relevant, but price is a tool of misdirection, allowing the big money to position before all of the people that you and I call friends outside of what we do for a living, talking about this stuff. The people who may be very smart, very bright, very well read, arguably just reading the wrong shit. And that's the problem. So most of the public has zero idea that there is a massive drive going on for gold and for silver in terms of delivery. Just as a side note, in the first 5 days or so, 6 days of the September contract, which is a non-delivery month, 3,626 gold contracts and 100 ounces apiece stood for delivery. So you're talking $1.5 billion there too.
Wow.
So in just the first week of September, you're seeing nearly $4 billion worth of metal stand for delivery. But this is what we've seen every single month. Now, we've always been an importer of silver, not always been, in fact, never, to my knowledge, been a net importer of gold. Both of them together signal a bigger move, a bigger trend, and that is that the smartest money in the world understands that there is a rush for physical acquisition of metal, bypassing the paper promises. So there you go, crazy times, brother, and I think we're just beginning in silver. The only saving grace is, and maybe I would like to think they're not misinformed. See, if you and I bought SLV, we can never take possession. They can, because it's the amount that they purchased. You have to have a certain amount, and it's called a basket. If you are able to redeem a basket, which I don't know the exact amount, 20, 30, 40, $50 million worth, they can. So I'll give you an example. Kyle Bass, when he was running the fund for the Texas Teachers Union years ago, they bought, if I'm not mistaken, $1 billion worth of GLD. They stood for delivery. Saudi Arabia can do the same thing here. They do have the right to stand for delivery, and most of that metal, if I'm not mistaken, is held in the LBMA. So because they bought such a significant amount, they can stand for delivery. And maybe they had a reason behind doing that I'm not sure. For you and I, buying SLV is as dumb as a mud wall.
Not only do you pay the capital profits for collectibles when you dispose of it, you can never take ownership. It's safeguarded by JP Morgan and BlackRock. Of course, JP Morgan, as we have highlighted multiple times, paid the largest penalty that the Justice Department had ever issued at that stage, $920 million or so, for manipulating the silver trade. And they don't call it manipulating, they label it spoofing, Andy, right? Well, and that was kind of, and the reason that I think that they got off so lightly, I believe that this was carried out at the urging of the central bank who gave them the approval to do this. And there are larger motives at play for suppressing the monetary metals. But that's for another debate, simply to say it was far greater. In fact, you could contend that it was far more than just spoofing. It was rigging and it was at one point considered it would be RICO allegations because in essence it's, like the hitman murders someone will then go after the mob boss because the mob boss commanded it. Well, the point of it is that who up the hierarchy of JP Morgan recognized this? Is it just the chief, the lead trader Michael Noak, who was the scapegoat that was put in prison for a couple of years? Or, I don't know. The point of it is that this is something that you can only distort a market for a prolonged duration by nudging it in the path that it is moving. And I've been engaged in this for almost 36 years. Most of the period, the globe didn't desire gold and silver. They wanted U.S. bonds and U.S. equities and property. They wanted what was, when events became frightening, there was a rush to the dollar. What is unfolding now is that the major funds across the world have become driven, coordinated, and advanced, and they grasp what's happening. The substantial wealth across the world largely being, when I say that, I'm referring to the BRICS nations in particular, Russia, China, now Saudi Arabia, India. All of these states comprehend, and they have been employing the spoofing or the rigging or the restraint of the metals trade against us. In other words, keep the paper rate low in the West and then travel all around the globe and drain the inventories, especially off of markets around the world that don't influence the rate. The rate is fixed in the West. So if you crush the rate down on paper here and then acquire it up there, boy, that works out perfectly. And they're wise enough to view the big panorama. That's what they're doing. And then they go as far. And just ask yourself, the second largest miner of silver in the world, the greatest miner of gold, don't trade in outs. They travel all across the globe and purchase gold and silver in ore, which is a roughly refined bar, and concentrate, which is a secondary output of it, directly from the diggers, which entirely bypasses the amount and bypasses the trade and the commercial lenders. They're thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. They're engaging in 3D chess. We're playing checkers. So I think that this is something that is being employed against us without declaring so. They comprehend it. I'll illustrate it this way. You know, I've invested a lot of time speaking about the BRICS, and the BRICS grain bourse is something that is in progress. And I heard an interview about the man who's directing a year ago, and he said, you know, we here in the BRICS generate and consume in the global south more wheat than they do in the west. Yet we have no authority over its rate because that is determined on COMEX. But with the progress of the BRICS grain bourse, that will alter. Now, you know, they grasp what we're performing with the valuable metals, with the industrial metals. All of the elements that we have constrained for assorted motives are now being wielded against us. It's jujitsu, the idea being you use your opponent's strength against them. And this is precisely what's occurring right now.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel. Your comments are very valuable to us. Please make a small comment.